Hello, I am EtherSlug. I quite often get to read and hear complaints from the players that the DM doesn't take their background seriously and doesn't integrate them into the campaign. On the other hand, I also hear similar complaints from the other side. DMs complaining that how players don't come up with backstories that work in their campaign settings. How is that and why? First of all, everyone should remember that tabletop RPGs should be collaborative storytelling endeavors, meaning that even though some ready campaign book from the D&D publisher might be quite railroady, and they usually are, it doesn't necessarily mean that the campaign has to follow a book page by page and word by word, and characters don't have to be the way they are in the text. There are a lot of YouTube videos about session zeros, and that it's often the point where the characters get information from the world to come up with backstory or links in their backstory to the world. And the DM gets to make the last minute changes to characters and places. Let's take a small example. What if a character's backstory had a generic love affair gone bad event in their backstory? Wouldn't it be cool to have the partner appear somewhere along the campaign? Well, of course, yes it would. What if the character just happens to be a minor character regarding the overarching campaign somehow? It doesn't have to be some like 5-hour long plotline from like Dragon Age or Baldur's Gate games. While you're investigating the disappearance of the noble's jewelry, a passerby tells that he knows of a private investigator who might know more about this. She lives 3 blocks away and has lived there all her life. The patron doesn't remember the investigator's name, but can roughly describe them just as the player described the character in the backstory. This might already give the player and the character enough fun and surprising way to encounter characters from their backstory. Their love might bloom once more, or it could also be that they didn't really split up on good terms, but the party knows that this is the person they have to go to get the information they need, so they might have to figure out a way to appease them or sneak into their apartment. Another example is just to use the background character as the passerby, just a random guy who happens to be there, but the player character ends up recognizing them. A lot of fun role-playing moments might ensue. Of course, this does require some amount of improvisation, but it also lets the players live out parts of their backstory again. It also fleshes out the character for the players and makes it feel more like a real person and not just a sheet of paper with stats and a weapon. So, if you are the DM, always tell the players to come up with just a few characters in their backstory that have had some impact in their life. Like, it could be their mother, it could be their friend or their first employer, whatever. Even though if the character is an edgy rogue who has always been alone, they might have had an uncle when they were a kid. Maybe they knew the grocery store owner well because carrying apples was their first job as a teenager, or whatever along the lines of those. If you really want to go deeper into this, the players could also come up with small backstories for their background characters. Just a few sentences to describe them, like what gets them up in the morning, what do they long for in rainy summer evenings, etc. In the same way, which is a bit more time consuming, is tell the players to come up with places and areas. It is always better in D&D for the players to know the things their character knows and not know what the character doesn't know. This of course is never possible, since it is hard to just only know certain things, and if the player knows too much they might end up metagaming. Usually to check if a character knows something, they roll a history check and then the DM explains the situation. But wouldn't it be cool if the characters were interacting with each other and telling their story of the world that they already know? For example, the rogue asks from the mage, "Hey mage, I remember you from here. Do you know anything about the drowned yard?" And the mage replies, "I was there a decade ago. It was horrifying. The corpses were bloated, the air was cold. I didn't see any spirits, but I know they were there. We really shouldn't go there unless we really have to. I don't think the patron told us everything about this mission." Usually the background areas and characters are easy to just sneak into the campaign in a side quest, side area, or as a smaller minor events for the characters. But there is nothing stopping you from taking the love affair from the first example and making her the big bad evil guy or a side boss, for example. Maybe the love affair a decade ago was a smoke screen for something bigger. Maybe the woman wanted something from the paladin in the first place and she actually initiated the relationship in the first place to gain access to something the paladin knows or has. The tabletop RPG Dungeon World has nice options and guides on how to build the world and the characters, and it actually is a collaborative way where the world is built. And I would really like for D&D players to learn from this game. It is the epitome of collaborative storytelling, whilst D&D often ends up feeling like the DM has to write a story and create a world for the players to enjoy in a way similar to TV shows are written as passive entertainment for the viewer to enjoy. To wrap this up, realize that everything the characters have in their background can be integrated and should be integrated into the campaign, but they don't have to be big character arcs to make them fun to encounter and play through. In video games, side characters' backstories usually last a few hours a maximum, and they're kind of like their own questline and character arc. It doesn't have to be that big of an ordeal for the DM to create complete quest lines around characters and backstories. Usually it's just enough for the players to really feel like their characters belong in the world to throw their backstory somehow into the game. For the players, realize that the more you put into your character and ask a DM on what kind of the world it is, the easier it is for the DM to integrate your characters in the world as real living, breathing persons instead of just the generic D&D mercenaries who go around killing people and monsters and gathering quests. Thank you for watching the video, and I will hopefully see you next time. Bye.